Born in Cleveland, raised a hillbilly. What's your story? Welcome to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. Here's your host, Sarah Blossom Ware.
Welcome to the last episode of the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Blossom Ware. So today I'll be reading the last chapter from my book. It's called If the Hills Could Speak. The way my family lived was not the exception, but the rule in Cove Creek community. Most of us lived on dirt roads, drove beater cars, and had no running water. In fact, the Prairie Grove City water lines did not even run out to Cove Creek until 1995, 3 years after I graduated from high school. Even then, this amenity was optional, and many families declined the opportunity because each family had to pay for the pipes and the installation from the main road to their houses. Anyway, we were all in the same boat, and relationships among the hill people were generally good. We had to take the good with the bad in people and learn to be very tolerant and forgiving of one another. Truth be told, there are still many families even today in Cove Creek and Hogeye and Bug Scuffle and the surrounding communities who live exactly as I described my childhood that was now 3 decades ago. In many ways, this life is every American's stereotypical image of the life of an Arkansas hillbilly. Barefoot, dirty, technologically impaired, and physically demanding. But hill people ain't stupid, and they is resourceful and persevering. They are kind-hearted, with a touch of wiliness and a whole lot of spunk. In 1953, Mrs. Emerson was valedictorian of her graduating class of 11 at Poughkeepsie High School in Sharp County, Arkansas. When she was 49 years old, Mrs. Emerson decided that she wanted to go to college. She fought for and was eventually granted a scholarship from the University of Arkansas based on her valedictorian status from 30 years prior, and she graduated with her teaching degree in 1988. After 13 years of teaching, Mrs. Emerson retired and has since written 2 books under the name of Geneva King Emerson, and also contributes folk stories to such magazines as the Ozark Mountaineer. My mother began nursing school when Mary Jane was a baby. She graduated with honors from the University of Arkansas's RN program in 1983, even though she worked, had 4 kids, and lived on the mountain in Cove Creek community. She has been a practicing nurse ever since, in addition to being a lactation consultant and a Lamaze instructor. Dad is the unassuming genius who reads encyclopedias and takes AutoCAD classes for fun. George has a master's degree, and Henry and Mary Jane have also gone to college. I myself am not unusually smart, but I am exceptionally perseverant. I am who I am because of my parents and my granny and all of the Vickerys and the Emersons and the fly swatter whoopings and the brown cars and the salt eating and the chicken neck ringing. I hope that I have served well as a voice for the hills. Praise God. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the last ever podcast of the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast series. We have back with us our panel members from the last several weeks. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and let them reintroduce themselves.
I'm Monica Lee Tischler, and my 6 words are born in NYC, lived in Tennessee.
I'm Abdullah Baig, and I'm the youngest of 3 pursuing an MD.
Okay, so thank you very much for being back with us. This is exciting, the 20th podcast of the series. It'll be sad not to have our discussions anymore, but we continue them outside of podcasts with all kinds of other peoples that we know. So what I would like to do before we get into discussions today is talk about some bucket list items. So I really like bucket lists and the idea of bucket list. So wondering, what do you guys have a bucket list? What have you checked off? Which maybe your next one that you want to check off? Things like that.
So I never really had like an official bucket list, but there are some things I definitely want to accomplish before, I hit the bucket. And one of them is to travel the world. Like, I know that's like very generic, but I'm a very like a history geek. I love history and, the Renaissance and the Egyptian period, like all those things. I definitely want to visit like all those historical sites, and Italy is one of like my go-to place. Like I really, really, really want to go as soon as possible to Italy and just explore all of it, because I definitely love the Renaissance and that period, and like the Middle East, and go to all those areas, and China, and like, it's just history always had like a big part of my life. I don't know, I just loved history, so that's like something I want to do on the bucket list. And then an immediate thing I want to do is go skydiving, and my mom will not let me go. So it's like either I go behind her back, or I just say, Mom, I'm going skydiving right now, and just do it. But that's like one of the things I really want to do, and that's like a current one. So I don't think I'll be able to travel until like I'm more like further in my life. But so far that's it.
What about, would she let you do the indoor skydiving?
Yeah, she'll probably let me do that, but I don't want to do that. I want the full experience, jumping out of a plane, like I want that full like experience. And I mean, growing up, she never let me do anything. She was overprotective. I had to be home before dark. So like, it's just now as I grow up, I want to do all these, I guess, dangerous things. And she had like, I had 2 older sisters, and they were never like that. Being a boy, I have all these crazy things I want to do, jump off.
Here's a suggestion. Say, Mom, I really want a motorcycle. I have been saving up for a motorcycle. And so here's the thing. A motorcycle is so much more dangerous. And you're like, Mom, maybe you're right about the motorcycle. I think I'll just go skydiving.
There's a problem with that, because I really want a motorcycle. And I have been saving for a motorcycle. And it's been years that I've been trying to convince her to like, my dad's okay with it because he rode one as a teenager. And I've been working so hard to convince my mom to let me get a motorcycle. And I mean, we're inching closer to it. But I mean, it's just hard because there's so many things that I didn't do in my childhood that are considered dangerous, and I'm trying to get it all out before I get into like.
I tell you what, as long as you wear a helmet when you're riding a motorcycle.
Yeah, that's the thing. She'll be like, I know you're safe, but it's the other people on the road. You never know. I have done everything I can, so it's just she's like, okay, you do it, go get it. But like, I know she's not gonna be happy with it, so it's just like it's not a win-win situation. It's like, yeah, I'll be happy with the motorcycle, but my mom's not gonna be happy, so it's just hard. It's a hard situation with that.
So what were you trying to say? So you want to get it all out before you have responsibilities? Or?
Yeah, basically. Like right now, I'm not responsible for anyone but me and my parents. But later on in my life, I'm gonna hopefully be responsible for kids, and I want to take the responsibility for my parents. At the age where they're not able to be fully by themselves, I want to be responsible for them. So before I'm at a situation where a lot of different lives depend on me, I want to try to like achieve all these fun things, get them out of the way, knock them out.
Yeah, sounds good. Monica?
I guess I'm kind of boring. I'm not sure quite what my bucket list is, although I do love to travel. Last year, I did do a bucket list item, which was we traveled through Israel and Jordan. And in Jordan, we saw the city of Petra, the stone city of Petra. That's like in Indiana Jones.
Really cool, yeah.
Yeah, I had some pictures on my door of that. Really cool. It was horribly expensive because you have to take, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Petra, and you have to take a tour. You can't just go by yourself. And that was incredible bucket list. In the last 3 years, my family and I have done some really interesting traveling where we went to Rome, and we've rented apartments. And so that we've stayed in one place and not taken this, one day here, one day here, one day here kind of tour. And we rented an apartment in Rome and in Nice in 2 separate years. And last year, Israel and Jordan, and that was so fantastic. And I'm going to China on Thursday. So that's another place. So I love to travel. My ultimate bucket list would be to spend a month in Paris. I don't know why a month in Paris, but at least I learned French in high school. So
you haven't been to Paris yet?
I took, when I in a previous podcast, I had said that my daughter had competed with figure skating internationally, and we were in Rouen. She competed in Rouen for a week, and we took a day trip to Paris. I am sorry. A couple hours on the bus, on and off, looking at stuff is not enough for Paris. Yeah. I would love to, rent an apartment in Paris for a while. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I just love to travel and to live in place and to go to the markets and to have to figure out how to do my laundry and all of those kinds of things. That just is just a wonderful cultural experience in all of those places.
That's a neat thing to do, immersion for a little while.
Even just for a short period of time. It's, figure out how to use the public transportation, how to get from here to there, even if you don't speak the language.
My family actually loves road trips, and last Thanksgiving, my brother-in-laws and my sisters, we actually drove all the way to New York, and that's the first time I've been to New York, and I loved it there. I've never been to New York, and I was like, a week was not enough for that. There was so much to see, so much to do, and we went to the Smithsonian, like all these museums, Empire State.
The Smithsonian is not in New York.
Or sorry, not this. The one from the Night of the Museum, the movie.
The American Museum of Natural History.
Yeah, sorry. That one. And it was just amazing to see, like, all these things I grew up seeing all these movies, Home Alone, and all these movies featuring New York. And I was just like, when I went there, I was completely lost. And it just felt like I was in a different country, really, because it truly is the melting pot. Like Chicago is too, but it was just, I went to different, I went to San Francisco, I went to Orlando before that. I went to many different cities, but New York is truly what they say it is. And, Chicago is amazing. I love it, but New York was at a different level.
I just have to break in here and say that when I was growing up, my father, who is a scientist, worked at the American Museum of Natural History.
That's really cool, yeah.
And so we would go all the time with him to his work. And the funnest part of the American Museum of Natural History for me was to go down the mammal hall to where the brown bear was, through to the Eskimos, and then there was a door with a lock. And then my father had a key to the door. Oh. And then behind that, behind the scenes was where his office was. And behind the scenes was all of that. And that was so cool growing up. That was a real fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And on he would take us on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We could go. It was behind the scenes that there was a lounge or a lunchroom or something where you could stand up on chairs and look out the windows and watch them blow up the balloons for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Wow.
Yeah. So maybe that was on your bucket list, and I've already
no.
That was like really fun and growing up as a kid. What's on your bucket list?
On my bucket list, well, if you would have asked me before the summer, it would have been to get African braids in my hair, but I did that this summer. So that was super fun because that was on my bucket list for at least 2 years. And so I was always telling my students, you've probably heard too, okay, this is my next bucket list item, And so finally I did it. So that was super fun. I'll probably do that next summer too. Because you can do it more than once, something on your bucket list. My next one, though, is a little bit generic, but is to get a tattoo. So I have no tattoos, but probably that would be my next one coming up.
The question is, do you really want to do that? Because do you really want your kids to get tattoos?
I don't mind.
Now, what influences what you put on your bucket list? Because you have really interesting things. So what influenced you to add, hey, I'm going to get braids on my list, and I'm going to add the tattoo thing on my list? What influences that?
Well, I just like a lot of different cultural things. I really, really like different cultures, different backgrounds, like what we're talking about here. So the African braids, I just really like how they look, basically. And I had a lot of really good friends when I was living in the Netherlands who were from different countries, some Ghana, or, a lot from Ghana mostly, but from really a lot of countries in Africa. And I really always admired their braids. And so I just thought, wow, it would be really cool to do that. And then I just kept thinking, well, really what took so long is I didn't know who would do it for me. So finally I just Googled. Google is good for a lot of things. Google is really good for things. And so I just Googled, African braids or cornrows. I think I Googled cornrows, which I ended up not getting. She talked me into the single braids. But I put in cornrows and Elgin, Illinois, because I live in South Elgin.
If you write cornrows, Elgin, you're probably going to get real corn.
Real corn. Cornfields and stuff like that.
No, this popped up. This lady's homemade website. She's from Cameroon. Her name is Rosie. And she braids hair, and she does all kinds of braids. She's so good at it. But it took 7 hours, so that was a lot of time. But then it was really easy for all summer, So, and I was teaching a triple accelerated class at College DuPage that was 5 hours a day, Monday through Thursday, and it started at 7:30. So I was super happy to not have to do one more thing in the morning, so I could just go to bed and wake up, and my hair is the same. Just go and. It was great.
How did people receive you? Did they receive you differently with braids? That people that know you and people that didn't know you before the braids?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, people who knew me, they just know me. So they know, oh, crazy Sarah. But, yeah, I actually taught with that hair at College DuPage that summer. And so it was pretty interesting to walk down the hall the first day. And there's a big corridor before the classroom door. And, all the students are sitting there waiting, and I'm walking, and then they see me take out my key card, and then, everybody was looking, what's going on?
No, this is the professor. This is the professor. Oh, no.
Yeah, but it's fun because I kind of like shock value. And so that was, that went right along with that. And I like breaking stereotypes. I super love breaking stereotypes. So that also kind of,
that's cool.
Went along with that. And so I actually even told my College DuPage students at the beginning of this semester, we went through the whole syllabus, blah, 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 first day stuff, and this is expected, this is not, don't cheat, all that stuff. And so then I said, you've probably formed some opinions about me. Some of them are probably true. Some of them may not be true. And I showed a picture of my, my braided hair, and I said, this class was forming different opinions about me, based on just appearance only. So, just let's get that out of the way, This is the kind of person that I'm going to be in your class. So, yeah, I don't know.
That's really cool. I can't imagine, if Dr. Tischler walked into...
with my hair in dreads or something,
like an afro or something like that. I don't know. I think people would pass out. That's too shocking.
But it was fun. I like experiencing different things, about cultures and actually kind of immersion, like what you're talking about. So that sounds, I immersed myself living in the Netherlands for 4.5 years. So, that was, and we also, we could have put my oldest into grade school, into an international school, which a lot of foreigners did, but we chose to just stick her into the Dutch school system, the same reason, just immersion and let her learn, the whole cultural aspect. So, yeah, bucket lists are nice. Bucket lists are good. All right, so let's see. One of the questions that I have for kind of related to this chapter, but also related to the whole book and the whole idea of how I grew up, is that really, and we talked about in a previous podcast, different hierarchies, like walking to school even, or being on a school bus, and there are the cool kids, and there are the kids you don't talk to, and there are, kids that get picked on, and the popular kids and all this. But a lot of people, I believe, relate being poor with being stupid. And so that's also another stereotype that I really am interested in trying to break whenever possible, just through kind of my stories even, because I grew up very, very poor, even though I enjoy, the memories that I have, and I never knew I was poor growing up, but actually it was adverse poverty. I mean, there's no getting around that when I look at the pictures now. But not that I'm smarter than anyone else, but, people can discount kids who grow up like that, who grow up with no electricity or running water and, no new clothes and things like that. So I'm just wondering why, if you've experienced that, people relating being poor with being stupid, or, and if so, why do you think those are kind of linked?
Personally, I just think it's the culture that our society has been built on. If you go back in the day where only the rich could afford school, only the rich went to school, and the rest, the poor, they ended up, doing housework, or, if they were on the farm, they did farm work, and they weren't able to go to school. And I think that's where that stereotype comes from. That's personally my belief, where education was for the rich and working was for the poor. And I feel like for some reason that's to this day, people have stuck to that, where they still think that, if you're rich, you could have this education, and if you're poor, you can't. And I think that's what leads people to think, hey, they're not educated, so they're dumb, or stupid. And I definitely think that's so wrong, because I've had experiences where people are, they're poor, or they grew up in a different way, but they're so smart, they're so genius. And it's just wrong to assume that just because they're poor, they're stupid. For example, I remember reading a story about how this guy, he was a farmer, and he created this contraption to water his plants differently, where they got the optimal amount of water to grow, obviously thicker and bigger. And that's so smart, but he didn't have a formal education. He didn't go to school. He might not have known scientific things or a regular education, but he is smart in where he mastered his trade. So if someone called him stupid, I just feel like that's stupid. You shouldn't be able to tell someone stupid because they didn't have education. They're a master of their trade, and that's smart of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess, again, I'm a little bit older than both of you and come from a place and a time where perhaps not everyone had as much. I didn't know any better. Of course, I grew up with running water. I grew up with electricity. I grew up with more material things, but I also grew up in a house that was on a lot that was 25 feet wide. And the only thing that maybe you could understand, Abdullah, is like a Chicago bungalow, all of these houses very, very close together. The lot was 25 feet wide. So the house itself, there was a driveway next to it. So the house was very, very small. And we didn't have much, but neither did anybody else. And if you're going to school with all of those people who are all like you, but whose parents think that education is important and whose families value education, then that's okay. And New York City had and still has a very, very good school system, has a very good system of colleges. Both of my parents went to college. They went to Queens College, which was free. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, went to college at City College of New York, which was free. And so just like we have the city colleges here, College of DuPage, well, now you have to pay for some of these, but at the time, those were free to anyone who graduated from high school. And so I think that I grew up in a way where you wouldn't think about that. On the other hand, and so I just didn't think about that. On the other hand, when I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, which I lived in Knoxville for 10 years, it was very interesting for my father-in-law, who grew up in Detroit. Didn't have a very strong formal education, but he was an engineer, blue-collar engineer for Chrysler for all of his working life. And he would equate people talking with an East Tennessee accent with people who were ignorant. And those were some of the smartest people I knew. But, of course, they also had running water. I lived in the suburbs in Knoxville, Tennessee. But, you have to sort of get past that, because we as a culture also think of people from the South or with that accent as being sort of more ignorant. And East Tennessee sounds very, very much like an Arkansas accent. It's that Appalachian accent, which isn't quite that same Southern drawl.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm wondering, I mean, obviously in New York City, probably there was not rustic living.
No, there wasn't. But, I also didn't live in the hood, right? There was a lot of hoodness, just not where I lived.
Okay. So I don't know if Abdullah, if you ever lived kind of...
Not really. That's the thing. Like, I was kind of blessed with being, I'm not like, middle class, whatever. But, I didn't face like being super rich and like experiencing that life, or being like, poverty, struggling, living like my family living paycheck to paycheck, or, not even having a paycheck. So I didn't get that kind, kind of like life. But, seeing something like that when I visited India, that was kind of like eye-opening for me, when I saw the shanties and the shacks and the people living on the street. And personally, I felt coming from America to see that was a whole different experience for the people living there. Because my family over there is like, well off, and so they didn't really understand how poor some of these people are. When I have never seen a homeless person on the streets. Sometimes when you go to Chicago downtown, you'll see them, but for them, it's like a normal thing. There's homeless people. They do their own thing. You leave them, and they live their life. But when I, visited there, it was like an eye-opening experience where, like, man, that's crazy. Like, these people live out on the streets. They live and die on the streets. And there's, like... It's like a normal thing over there, where here, especially like, in Chicago and stuff, yeah, you'll see some here and there, but it's a rare thing. You don't really hear about that much. They do have homeless shelters over there. Their street is, they don't like, it's not an active effort over there to change that, really. I'm sure there's like some things going on over there, but it's just, that's really eye-opening to see someone living like that.
So how did your parents, who grew up in Cleveland, then make that decision and that transition? Because that must have been, for you grew up that way. This is what you didn't know any differently. Right. But your parents didn't grow up that way. Your parents grew up with electricity. Your parents grew up with running water. Your parents grew up with, shall we say, conveniences. How was it that your parents made that decision? And because that would be different for them than for you, because that was a conscious decision on their part.
Definitely, and that's something. That's why I really feel like, I feel like I have a super unique perspective on the Hill peoples and where we live, because my parents chose that. No one's choosing that. Really, people are content there. It's not. I'm not saying they're not content. But it's not a regular thing that people from Cleveland are going to just drop in and start living without electricity and things like my parents did. So I'm kind of in between all the time. I'm like Southern, but I'm, from Ohio, but, it's all mixed up, But I guess it was kind of a spontaneous decision. So I'm actually pretty spontaneous. I don't know if you can gather that. But it was a pretty spontaneous decision. So within 3 weeks, they just were there. Oh. So they visited, and really loved it, came back, said we're moving, and sold everything, and we were. So it was a pretty spontaneous decision. My dad says, he just didn't want to raise kids in downtown Cleveland. So he found somewhere very different to do that. And so away we were. But yeah, it's not a regular thing. And even Mrs. Emerson, who we didn't kind of talk much about except mention her in this podcast when I was reading. But she was the neighbor. The Emersons were our neighbors on the mountain. They helped build the cabin when my parents needed help because they didn't know what they were doing. They had no prep, right? They had no plan. The plan was just go there. There was no job lined up for anybody, nobody that they knew, no place to live lined up. Just we're driving there and then we're sorting it out. And so that was the plan. As a parent now, I can't imagine it like doing that. But anyway, they chose it. It's okay. It worked out. But, they went there and they found neighbors, and the neighbors, the Emersons, helped them build this cabin and helped them figure out, brown beans and cornbread and Southern things and, goat milk and all kinds of stuff. So they just went and they sorted it out. And but Mrs. Emerson is, she's still in Poughkeepsie, but she's in Sharp County there, where she ended up teaching. And I've spoken to her recently and sent her a copy of the book, and and she says there's got a special place on my shelf, and it's so sweet. But she said, when your parents, when you guys moved up there, we thought they're never going to make it. So she said, there's no way they're going to make it, and she said it was wild and woolly.
That is wild. When
they moved up there on that mountain, I was like, it's still wild and woolly. People up there refuse city water. There's no city water still because they refuse it. They don't want people up there. So that's, they chose quite the spot. They chose quite the spot to move to. But yeah.
So I had a question for both of you. You guys are at a point in life where I consider both of you really successful. So coming from, different backgrounds, starting from nothing, how does it feel right now in your life to be successful and to be at a point where you've probably always dreamed of being, or you guys are both successful, so how does that feel right now?
Well, I'm very happy where I am. When I got married to my husband, we've been married 29 years now, I was still working on my PhD. He's been very supportive. We got married. It was more important for us to get married. We had planned on when the wedding was based on me finishing my PhD. Well, of course, I didn't. But we still had, the date and everything set. The rings picked out. We got married, went on our honeymoon, and then I went back to finish my PhD and joined him. We got married in August. I joined him the following July. So we were apart for a year because that was important to us. And then I did a postdoc and did some other things so that I could stay with him. When he had the chance to transfer here to Oregon National Labs to the Chicago area, I said, I've always wanted to teach. And I was working at at an environmental consulting company. I took a 30% pay cut to work at the university teaching, and I've never regretted that for a bit. It took 15 years to be making the exact amount of money that I did when I left being an environmental consultant. So it was a trade-off. And several years ago, my husband was given a choice of moving back to Tennessee or actually changing his job. His job was from Tennessee, and it was moving back to Tennessee. And I said, I'm a tenured professor. We also had a child in high school, and I said, we're not leaving a child in the middle of her high school career. And I said, see what you can do. And so he changed to be for me, so that I could still be a college professor. I'm feel that I'm blessed every single day. I'm doing something that I love, and it's more than just money, right? And it's more than just that. It's really nice to be able to impact. And I meet so many different students from so many different places. And that's sort of like my bucket list of wanting to travel. I get to hear about students, right? I get to hear about students from all sorts of places. You know that as a student at Benedictine University, we have students from all sorts of places with all sorts of interesting stories. And that's really kind of fun.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to echo. I mean, it's a super huge responsibility to be a college professor because actually, you know, professors are in a position to kind of shape thinking and, you know, influence some people. Some people maybe not, but it's a huge responsibility. I mean, I never take that lightly, and but at the same time, it's really, you know, it's a lot of fun. I know actually in the class that Abdullah is in with me right now. It's a humanities class. I usually teach science, but I'm teaching this humanities class. But anyway, I remember after one of our pretty tough discussions, we talk about some topics that a lot of people don't maybe talk about. Controversial. I really love controversy because that's how you get people talking and that's how you know what you believe. And so we do a lot of that in there. But after one particular topic that was pretty controversial, one of the students just told me, "Oh, my head hurts. I just got to go sort out all of these new ideas that are in my head." And like she had a headache, and I just said, "Yes, that's what college is for." You know, so but it's, you know, it's a great honor. I feel like, you know, it's an honor and it's a privilege to be someone's college professor. I mean, how many, you can have a handful, you know, of college professors that people have, and to be one of those is, you know, it's very fulfilling. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I really enjoy teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously not only like school related, like subject related things, I just learned so much from my professors. And that's another thing. That's another reason I kind of chose Benedictine, because compared to going to like somewhere like U of I or somewhere where you're in a class with like 500 students and the TA is teaching the class, or, you know, you'll see once in a while, you'll see an instructor. You don't really get to build that connection with your instructors and your professors. And in high school, I was also, you know, I was very close to my teachers. And so when I came to Benedictine, like having a small class size, and, you know, having like a lot of office hours and stuff, you're able to connect with your professors and learn at a whole new different level. And I think that's like very important for some students.
Yeah, the worst thing ever for me, if a teacher-wise, professor-wise, is when it's the end of the semester. Well, I mean, that's sad anyway, because anyway, I usually get teary. But the end of the semester, when there's that student or several students who walk out for the last time, who have just come in and sat quietly, you know, not really participated, not said a word, walk out, and I think I have no idea who they were. And that is, for me, that's, you know, it's not acceptable. But, you know, we have the opposite. I actually don't usually go so in depth as with you, Abdullah. But, you know, but it's been super fun to be able to podcast with, you know, the seventh student who's come in. So, you know, that's, you know, really, really an interesting aspect that I think, you know, it's true because the classes are smaller. At Benedictine and also, you know, everywhere I teach, College of DuPage and Aurora University, they're all small class sizes, and so it's possible to do that, you know, what you're talking about.
Well, I think it's just very important. I really enjoy interacting with students, some students more than others. Some students never come to office hours, and then there'll be, you know, 3 of them sitting in a row, and I'm not quite sure if it's A, B, or C because, you know, they're sitting in a row and never saying a word. But I wouldn't change this for the world. I had the choice when we moved here to Chicago to continue working as a consultant or to try and get a job as a college professor, and this is just perfect. I get to think about really interesting things. I get to try and give my enthusiasm to students, and I just feel the richer for it.
Yep, I agree. I definitely agree.
One more question. If, since I'm so young, I'm always trying to ask, people that I find successful, what do you think the most important thing is to be successful? Like, what do you have to absolutely do? Like, do you have to be really hardworking, or you have to have some sort of quality to be successful?
I think you have to be stubborn.
I was going to say persevering. So it's the same.
Persevering and stubborn is the same thing. I think that you have to be stubborn or persevering, but you also have to like what you're doing. And it's not, find your passion, find your dream, follow your dreams. You can be whatever you want to be. No, I cannot be a singer. We've covered that, right? We've covered this. I'm never going to dance as a ballerina on stage. There's lots of things that I would love to do that I'm never, ever, ever going to do. But I don't know that I'm smarter than anybody else. I just am more stubborn about the things that I really, really like. But you have to be realistic, right? Mm-hmm. People coming into Benedictine, they all want to be doctors, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're not all going to make it, definitely. Right? But they're all going to be good at something. And you only need enough to live on. This is part of the theme of this particular chapter, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need that much, right? But you need shelter, you need food,
running water.
You need to have your basic needs met. But once you have your basic needs met, do you need a smartphone? Do you need cable TV? Do you need, I don't have either of those, okay? Right? So do you need those kinds of things? Do you have enough so that you're happy doing what you're doing?
That's another word that came to my mind too when you were asking is content. You need to be content to be successful. That's all you need. Persevering and content.
And doing something that makes you content.
Right.
That's great advice.
Yeah. Well, Monica and Abdullah, thank you once again for participating in this podcast and in the previous podcasts. Our time is up for today, which means our time is up for the entire project. This project has been so much fun for me, and this project has been so important to me. So many people have been supportive. I'd like to thank Cynthia Kremer and my mom, Judy Kuharick, for helping me write and edit discussion panel questions. And of course, I'd like to thank all of the discussion panel members, 7 students and 7 other colorful, upstanding members of the community, all volunteering their time and their stories. They were truly great panel members, every one of them. But the beauty of it is that every single one of us has wonderful stories to tell. Well, this is the last podcast, like I said, but I don't like goodbyes. So, signing off as usual. Thank you for going on this journey with us. Dream big and have fun.